Okay, Chevra, amazing. Thank you so much for joining. As we jump back into our Thursday night series in the Sefer Yichud HaShabbos from Rav Kluger shlita. We began last week with a new mimer called Minyan Hayamim L'Shabbos. And we covered pretty much the first page, pretty much, both sides of the page. And we'll just review that quickly, and then we'll jump back into it. We were learning about the counting of the week, the counting of weekdays. And we said that unlike we have by the nations of the world where Sunday has a name and Monday has a name and Tuesday has a name, in Yiddishkeit there are no names for the days of the week. There's Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, and so on and so forth, which are counted l'Shabbos. We're counting the days to the next Shabbos or from the previous Shabbos. Yom Rishon l'Shabbos, one day away from Shabbos, and so on and so forth until Yom Shishi or Yom HaShishi, and then we enter into a new Shabbos as well. And Rav Kluger wanted to know if there's any correlation between the counting that we do, which according to the Ramban, like we learned, is a mitzvah sasei d'oraisa based on the pasuk Zachar Yom Shabbos l'kadshay, to actually remember Shabbos, Zachreu me'echad b'Shabbos, to remember Shabbos each and every day of the week. That according to the Ramban, that's a mitzvah sasei d'oraisa. So the Ramban wanted to know, is there any correlation between this mitzvah of counting all the days toward Shabbos and Sfir Sa'omer? Two mitzvahs that we have in the Torah, both have to do with counting days, and he wants to know what's the correlation, if any, between the two. Are they the same? Are they different? Or what? So on the second side of the page, we learned, well, I guess he asked the question, why is it that the Torah refers to a week with the word Shabbos? Like in the context of Sfir Sa'omer, Ad Mimachar HaShabbos HaShvius Tisper Chamishim Yom, until the 7th week. So says Rav Kluger, I don't understand. If Shabbos is something that is separate from the days of the week, because we already learned many times in the past that Shabbos is not really part of it's not part of the structure of the week. Shabbos is above. Shabbos is completely beyond the week. Shabbos stands alone. And really all there ever are 6 days, and then Shabbos is Mashu Acher. Going back to the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, right, the letters of which encompass all of creation, the 6 days of the week is the letter Vav. That's what it is, right? And then Shabbos is the final Hey, which connects to the first Hey, which bridges heaven and earth. But it's Bechlal not included in the sixness, right, of the Vav, Gematria 6. It's a completely different thing. So says Rav Kluger, how strange then to consider the 7 days of the week by the name Shabbos if Shabbos has nothing to do with it. It's not Yom HaShvi'i. Why even does the pasuk refer to it as the 7th day? It's Bechlal not a day. It's like we learned also, was it in the Shalosh Shittas, the Piyasetzin Rebbe shiur, I can't remember which shiur, recently, we also mentioned that it's like you're breathing in. You're removing yourself from the experience of the sixness, and we're going back into the pre-creation energy, and then, okay, Sunday, Hashem breathes out, Kiviyachol, the world begins again. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then right, back into the source, Yom Adinishmasa. Everything goes back into its root, and then from there, we breathe out another 6 days of the week, right? So he wants to know, Ma Kesher, the 7, idea of 7 with Shabbos Kodesh that stands above and beyond it. Here he says something very, very deep. I spent a lot of time on this earlier today. I'm going to hope to try to give it over in a way that makes sense to me, but we'll have to probably work this through together because it's a very, very abstract thing. And let's try to read it together, and you'll correct me if you think that I'm reading it wrong, and we can discuss it. This is called Soid, sorry about that, Soid Hamadida Haminyan. 1 second. It's a call from somebody that I can't take the call, but it's a reminder to do the audio on the Achana L'Shabbos group, so that's a good. So just 1 second. Soid Hamadida v'Haminyan. The secret of measuring and counting. What's the inyan of this? Measuring. Oh, no, didn't want to do that. Sorry. What's the inyan of this? Measuring and counting. Says Rav Kluger as follows. Ulevayer kol zeh niftach bebir soid hamadidus bebriya. In order to understand how we relate to Shabbos in the context of the 6 days of the week, he wants to explain the secret of all measuring. Ki hine explains as follows. Turn over the page. Shin ayin tes. Mashem moididin davar ba'oirech v'roichav. When a person goes ahead and measures something ba'oirech v'roichav, in its length and its width. Hamadida, the act of measuring, hil rak lefi erech davar achar chitzoni el oisai davar hanimdad. The measurement that we're making is only possible in relation to other things around it. Meaning you need a relative framework in order to measure anything. Otherwise, if you can imagine a cup without any reference of any other object, the cup is at infinite. Because if you shrink consciousness to infinitesimally small, maybe all there is the cup. There's no way to measure it against anything else. Maybe this is as big as it possibly is, because there's no relative size. There's nothing. It's impossible for us to think about that or to imagine it. But each thing is only possible to be measured in relation to other things that exist. When you measure something, and the thing, let's say, lamashal, is 2 amos, he says that measuring is not really a measurement in and of or within the thing itself. It's just a measurement of where does this thing begin and where does this thing end in relation to the halal, in relation to the space that it occupies. To say, okay, in this space, which is held relatively by other objects and items, so now we have a relative framework of measurement, I can take out a ruler and say this is 2 amas, because now I have the clarity of what an amma is, right, based on the relative measurements of other things that exist. But it isn't a measurement of the thing in and of itself. I just measured one end of this thing to the other end of this thing, again, in relation to other things around it. And hopefully this will become a little bit sharper when we speak about the other alternative, right? He's setting it up as a system of contrast. Virak kasher hamadida hi biyachas ala chalal. Is somebody in there? The side room? No, I hear some noise. Someone want to check out what's going on over there? Shkach, thank you. Virak kasher hamadida hi biyachas ala chalal shetoifes meha'olam. Right? It's only when the measurement starts in relation to the space around it, I can look at this thing and say, okay, all this, not cup, not cup, not cup, not cup. Oh, cup. Okay, here's the beginning of it. Then I measure until the end of cup, not cup, not cup, not cup, right? And so now I was able to measure it in relation to everything that was around it. So the measurement is, where does this thing begin? And then I start to measure, where does it end? I stop to measure and I carry on. And I get to 2 amos. Ube'emes, however, if it would be hidden from the external sides of this thing as oisa davar hanimdad, where this thing begins, where it ends, I wouldn't be able to measure this thing because I wouldn't know where it starts and where it ends. In order to be able to measure, this is usually the way that we measure things, I have to see the beginning of it, I have to see the end of it, and then I have a tape measure, right? It's called the tape measure here, the yellow thing, right? Usually yellow. I don't know if all tape measures are yellow, not discriminating against non-yellow tape measures, but if you have a yellow one, or any color one, you put one end on one end, and you pull and pull and pull until you get to the second end. Again, this is going to be clearer when we understand the other alternative. What's the alternative way of measuring? Says Rav Kluger, Ella, if you think about it deeply, take this cup, for example, the width of the cup, there was a completely different way of measuring this. Because how did I measure it prior? If everybody who's joining the call can please mute, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you. So how did I measure it? Because I started from here, and then I measured until here. The other way to measure it is to start within itself from the center. And then from that center point, to measure half the circumference outward, which let's say it was 2 amas, which it's not, that's 1 amma. And then from that middle point to the other side, till the end, and that's 2 amas. So I didn't measure it from the outside to the other extent of the outside, but rather we begin from the Nekudas HaMerkaz. Now, this is not a usual way to measure things, because why would you measure something that way? It's much easier to measure it from one end to the other end. But he wants to speak metaphorically, and you're going to see where he goes with this, where there is a fundamental difference between measuring something from the extremity or measuring something from the interior essence, which we're going to see he's going to explain.
Does this mean,
yeah,
so like as in to anthropomorphize the object, does this mean it's from the external perspective?
Yes.
Versus the object's own perspective if the object was
yes, exactly. And that's where he's going with this in relation to Shabbos and its relationship with the days of the week. That's exactly right. So he says like this: everything that is measured has the nekudas merkaz. Has its internal central point. Please, if everybody's joining, can mute themselves. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to do this anymore. If you're joining, please mute. Otherwise, we're going to have to stop the call because it disturbs. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Umimenu efshar liftayach ba'aracha she'yarai lechol tzad. So unfortunate. Right? So from there, you're able to measure all the way to the other side. Yamanu small, because if you start in the middle, you're able to measure it to one end, go back to the middle, measure it to the other end. Because wherever you started the measurement from, there's going to be a central point, right? Because this thing is not endless, it has ends. So if it has edges, it has a center. Infinity doesn't have a center. That's one of the paradoxes of the Arizal, which begins right in the beginning of Eitz Chaim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the beginning, whatever we can think of beginning, beyond time and space, there's no beginning, there's no end. It's just our experience of it. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu began the process of creation, he says, Minekudas HaMerkaz Shebe'ein Sof, from the center point of infinity. Right? So it's like a huge paradox. There is no center point of infinity. Every point in infinity is the center. And the Ramchal and Adav Amarim explains this in a very deep way, in a more metaphorical way instead of a geographical or geocentric way, where the essence is a reference to the concentrated yearning, the will of Hashem. Meaning creation wasn't like a side project. That's how the Ramchal learns it, if I'm not mistaken. I think toward the end of Adav Amarim, if I'm not mistaken, he says over there that that's what it means. Hashem began creation simsum from the center. It means this is the center of his focus. You're right, there's no center in Ein Sof, right? But Bechalal, once you say infinite, you're not even speaking about space anymore, because it's completely beyond the concept of space. So there's no center and there's no space. He learns it in a metaphorical way. Okay. But if a thing is not infinite, then there is most definitely going to be a point in the middle that's in the center. Therefore, even something that is 2 amos wide, as it relates to measuring it from an external perspective, meaning taking one edge, measuring it to the other edge, you think it's 2 amos because you're looking at this thing externally. But if you could imagine, this is what Rabben was saying, if you can constrict your consciousness and show up in the middle of the cup, like if that's where you were seeing the world from, right? If your whole consciousness was right here in the middle, then it's not 2 amos. It's one amma on all sides. Wherever you turn, it's 1 amma, because it's all about perspective. So you're right, the width is 2 amos. Well, from your perspective, you only see 1 amma at a time. Again, b'metzias it's 2 amos. Obviously, it doesn't change where you're measuring it from. But we're saying from the standpoint of consciousness, what you see is 1 amma on either side. You're in the center. And then from there, you can make 2 cheshbonos. Well, 1 amma from there to me, turn in the opposite direction. 1 amma from me to there. Done, 2 ammas. Okay? Right? Because if you're in the central point, so then all the sides are equal, and you're not able to have this overarching measurement from one side to the other. You're in the center of it. You can measure 1 amma from there to you, 1 amma from you to there. 2 ammas. From whatever side you're measuring it, assuming it's a circle, so it's equidistant from the locus, from the center. So the only thing I remember from geometry, those words, locus and circumference. Anyway, the locus of a circle is a point. I just had that like emblazoned in my nefesh for some reason. Didn't get anything else out of high school. That's the only thing I remember. But you see, it's useful. Right, so if you're at the locus in the center, so then from there to here, from here to there, Amma mikan va'amma mikan. Okay. Again, it's all a mashal. We're not, learning. I don't know what this is. Algebra. Right? So what is he trying to say? This is the case when it comes to measuring length and width. And he says the same applies from the standpoint of counting. Right? Because counting is also a form of measuring. It's just counting quantitatively instead, right? Items as opposed to counting distance, right? But it's all counting. It's all numerology. And so the same idea depends on measuring time, counting days. Let's say a person has a bunch of objects on the table, a bunch of plastic cups, and I'm counting from one side. It's the same idea, all the way to the other side. So I start from one end, 1 cup, 2 cups, 3 cups, 4 cups, 5 cups, 6 cups, 7 cups, 8 cups. Okay, got to the end of the cups, and that's 8 cups. But again, all of this is from the external perspective, looking at one edge from an external perspective, and looking at the other edge from an external perspective. Let's say a person's counting time. So we gave the idea of counting objects, but imagine now he's counting not in the realm of space, but in the realm of time, zman, and not in makom. Love, in relation to where he's positioned, so he's able to count all the things that are in front of him from an external perspective, looking at what's there. Again, but the same idea, when the person is in, so you imagine you embody the consciousness of one of those cups, now it's a whole different story. If you as the cup wanted to measure how many cups, you don't start from one edge and then count. You're one of them. You're in it, right? So you would do is from you count 1, 2, 3, 4 until the end. Turn in the other direction 1, 2, 3, 4 because you're in it. It's not an expression of the things that are being counted. It's embodied. He's one of them. And therefore, anything, again, that's not infinite, anything that's countable has a central point, that everything can be counted from that point and will eventually come back around to that point. The question is where you start counting from. I know this is very abstract, but hopefully we presented it clearly enough. Are there any questions before we go further? Just again, this is not like Torah per se, it's just saying facts. Right? There are two ways of counting depending on your perspective vis-a-vis those items or those days. Good? Okay. It's mamish the deepest thing what he's saying. Now you can understand that there are two different ways of counting the days to Shabbos. When we count the days of the week, certainly when we count the days of the week, what are we really counting toward? Shabbos. Why? Because Shabbos is the center of the week. Shabbos is the central station, right? That from it, from it, like the Zohar says, from it is blessed all the 6 days of the week. The next line, from it is blessed the 6 days of the week. All 6 days are blessed from Shabbos. And it's known in Pnimius HaTorah, Shabbos hu ikra shel Shavua. Shabbos is not the end of the week. Shabbos is the center of the week. Shabbos is the fountain of the week. And so a proper way of counting is to say, well, there are 3 days out of the 6 leading up to Shabbos, then there's Shabbos, and then there are 3 days after Shabbos. On this Yisoid, Reb Chaim Vital, Schus Yagonolenu founded a Seder Alim and Chok Li Yisrael. Yeah, there's a collection of different teachings that people learn, which was instituted by Rabbi Klein Vital. Others added to it and made it a little bit more elaborate. B'chol yom, ba'oivin sha'kavana b'kriyas hapsukim b'gimel yomim rishonim, where al pi Kabbalah, the kavana that a person's supposed to have on the first 3 days, which is Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, right? The quote unquote the beginning of the week, is lahashir ha'ara mitaysefes nefesh ruach neshama shel Shabbos ha'avra. The kavana is, we had Shabbos, and then I'm trying to preserve the illumination of nefesh, ruach, neshama in descending order from the previous Shabbos. So Shabbos is mamish, the pinnacle. Shabbos, we would say, if you're talking about the spectrum of layers of the soul, you'd call Shabbos chaya, which sits above neshama, ruach, and nefesh. And then as I emerge away from Shabbos, Sunday is going to be neshama, Monday is going to be ruach, Tuesday is going to be nefesh. Those are the 3 days after Shabbos, sort of descending back down into the world. Uvegimel yamam achroinim, and then from Wednesday into Thursday into Friday, I begin to climb back up, lekabel ara minaran shel Shabbos haba, to begin to receive the nefesh, again in ascending order, right? Nefesh to the ruach, to the neshama of the Shabbos that will be, culminating in Shabbos Kodesh, which brings you back into that realm of chaya, which brings you back into that realm of atzilus, as we're going to see in a minute. Ba'oifin, and here he puts it into the different terminology we might be a little bit more familiar with, of the oilamais, right? So we have the 4 realms, atzilus, bria, yitzira, and asiya, 4 different strata of reality, where reality is bridged from the infinite, and then slowly but surely becoming more and more and more and more coarse, so to speak, until here we are in the physical reality. A good way to remember this, or to understand, even though there are millions of ways to understand what these 4 levels are, but a good way to understand it, which is explained by Ari Kaplan, writes this very beautifully in his crucial book Inner Space, which is like must read. It's a foundational text of our tradition, Inner Space. So he writes over there that the world of Atzilus, which is the loftiest and corresponds to the Yud of Yud Kei Vav Kei, is the realm of ayin. It's nothingness, right? Meaning from our perspective, it's total obliteration of all time and space and anything that we grasp onto to say, okay, this is reality. It's beyond that. Ayin, it's nothing. The next level down, which is the world of Bria, is Yesh Me Ayin. It's when Yesh begins to emerge from that place of Ayin. So now that the world of Bria, the world of creation, bridged the realm of Ayin, Atzilus, which emerges into, now there is the beginning of a Yesh Me Ayin. You come down to Yetzira, which is the next world, which now becomes Yesh Mi Yesh. Right, so now there was something that was created. The Ramban, in the beginning of his commentary to the Torah on the word Bereshis, bara. If you take a look at the Ramban says bara is a reference to what's called hiyuli, or in English hyle, H-Y-L-E, which is basically some kind of material out of which you can create all other materials. Right? It's a primordial material. It exists, but it doesn't exist. It's in the realm of Bria. It's in a liminal space between nothingness and somethingness. Yetzira, which means literally to form, so Bria is just the silly putty. It's just the clay. Yetzira gives tsura. It's yesh mi yesh, and then finally here we are in the world of Asiya, where reality has developed fully. Okay, this is the progression, or the bridge that gaps the infinite creator and the finite creation. Yud, Atzilus, Ayin, Hey, Bria, Yesh Me Ayin, Vav, Yitzira, Yesh Me Yesh, and finally the last Hey, which is Asiya. That's the world of action, where things are ready to plug and play. Everything is here. Yesh, the resolute Yesh. Okay, and that's the bridge between Ayin all the way down to Yesh. If you want to think about it in other terms, you can think about the 4 levels of Limud HaTorah: Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Soid. Soid and Pshat are on 2 different extremes, just like Atzilus and Asiya, right, are Ayin and Yesh respectively. They're on 2 sides of the spectrum. What bridges Atzilus and Asiya? Bria and Yetzira, which are liminal spaces. Yesh Me Ayin, Yesh Me Yesh. And these are the realms of drush and remez that are sort of bridges between pshat and sod. Right? They bring a person deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until you get, to the neshama of Torah, right? Which is the sod. Okay? And there are other corresponding elements as well, without getting into them now. That's basically how it goes. See, he puts this into more common terminology that we just explained, B'siyata d'Shmaya. Ba'ofen sheyimei revi'i chamishi v'shishi, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are keneged, correspond to the olamais of Asiya, Yitzira, and Bria. Just again, another terminology, to say Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. That's what it is. Asiya, Yitzira, and Bria. Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama are the aspects of Asiya, Yitzira, Bria embedded in the human form, right? In our Tzelem Elokim. So we refer to the olamais ontologically, right? Meaning with regard to creation as a whole. Embodied, we say, okay, that's the nefesh comes from Asiya, the ruach comes from Yitzira, the neshama comes from Bria. That's in us. See, he's saying on a general creation level, Wednesday is Asiya, Thursday is Yitzira, Friday is Bria, and then Shabbos, Atzilas. Milamata lamala, climbing up the ladder from below to above. And then after Shabbos, V'shuv yardim, because you got to get back to Wednesday. So then you climb down the ladder. You climb down from Atzilas, one level after another level. From above to below. Without getting too deeply into it, this is the kavanas that the Arizal wants a person to have as you proceed through the week. You wake up in the morning on Sunday, you say, this is neshama. Monday, ruach. Tuesday, it's nefesh. And then Wednesday, which is why the shiur shel yom of Wednesday is l'chuna ranana, right? So we already begin, to taste the oncoming light of Shabbos. You start again, nefesh, and then ruach, and then neshama, and you ascend into the place of chaya.
So Tuesday night is the lowest point of the week.
I guess, in a sense. Usually we think Monday morning is the lowest part of the week. But I guess, it's the darkest point. Interesting. Yeah. It's the center of the week from that standpoint. Right? Depends where you measure it from, and that's exactly what he's going to say now.
Still skitay.
Huh? It's right. But that's not, it's daika, right? Because Toiv is the Yetzer type. Toiv Ma'oid is a Yetzahara, meaning that's the site of the darkest point being the place of the greatest potential light, right? Which is the whole tachlis of the Bria. It's to build for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, dira b'tachtainim, and the darker it gets, the more the light shines. Beautiful. So he says it's true. If you measure the week from an external perspective, which we spoke about physiologically, like I was giving the mashal of a cup or the table or something else, so then where do you start the week from? Sunday, and you end the week at Shabbos, because these are the edges of the week that we can see, what he calls b'istaklis chitzonis, right? From a this worldly standpoint, it's like after the weekend you start Sunday, because we live in a Christian society and we think that that's what it is. That's istaklis chitzonis. He says, Amnam. Anu minyan hayamim be'istaklis pnimis humiyam revi'i. If we were immersed in it and looking at the world from a place of pnimius, we would count from Wednesday. Wednesday would be the first day of the week. And then we would move toward the center of Shabbos, because if we were Shabbos-centric, then all you would see on one side of you was 3 days, and then on the other side of you was 3 days, because you're in the middle of it and you're not measuring from the edges.
We also count from Yom Rishon. So
He's going to say. He's going to say. So ubevadai shashavua lo matchil miyom revi. Right, but however, like we're saying, we do start on Sunday when hayom Yom Rishon l'Shabbos. We don't have our week structured in that way, where Wednesday is the first day. Because what can you do? We're living in a world of chitzonius. It's true. And so it's true from a certain perspective, the way that we live in this world, we have to embrace the reality of a physical world in which Sunday is the beginning of the week, which reaffirms the fact that we live in a gashmius reality. Shaboy hayom hashvi'i hu Shabbos. And therefore the seventh day, if you begin from Sunday, ends up being Shabbos. Ein lanu limnais as minin hayamim ela ba'ifin shekol sheishes hayamim yakfu and kruvim b'yaiser el nekudas hamerkas. So he says, even though it's true that we live in a physical world, it's on us to shift, even though, again, even halachically, we're saying, Hayom Yom Rishon l'Shabbos, Hayom Yom Sheni l'Shabbos. It's true, we don't start Wednesday, Hayom Yom Rishon l'Shabbos. But subliminally, it's on us to really shift our focus, and it's like a total shift, because like we're not used to thinking in this way. It's like we think of a week from Sunday to Shabbos. He says, the deeper a person gets, and the more bestaklis pnimis, you actually start to see the week differently. You start to see the week differently. Now again, the way that society has it set up is not amenable to this, because our whole week structure, especially if Sunday you're off work, so it's like part of the weekend, it doesn't lend itself to starting to count the week from Wednesday. But that's really what it is. The beginning of the week is Wednesday. Shabbos is the heart and soul of the week, it's the middle of the week. And then we carry on counting. And he says, a tzaddik, a person who's living in this way, that's how we see Shabbos. And it requires a shift in focus and, remembering this as much as we can remember it. Just go a little bit further. And he says, this is what it means when we sing in the piyot Azamer b'shvachin asher yasar ha'arizal, which the Ari HaKadosh instituted the Omer B'Leil Shabbos to say it Friday night, where there's a stanza over there that says Yemina v'smala, to the right and to the left, ubeinayu kala, and the bride is in between them. So he says, what's the meaning of this? Shah Shabbos hu mashal ela kala. Shabbos, we know, is likened to a bride. Hukamayshah kasa b'Gemara and encoded in the whole Lechadaidi, the whole Kabbalah Shabbos, boy v'neitzei likras kala malkasa. Shabbos is referred to as a kala, as a bride. There's a great wedding taking place on Shabbos, like we learned at length in previous shiur. Ukeshem sha'kala hi haleches b'merkaz. The same way that a kala, where's the kala? The kala is not walking at the edge of the group, right? Can you imagine the whole entourage is walking a kala and she's all the way at the edge? Never happens, right? Where's a kala? Kala is surrounded. All right, it was very beautiful this morning, the way that we set up the Hallel, because the Yid, was coming to record, and so we moved the bima to the actual center, at least, of the men's section, and it was a whole different energy. I didn't, it's because it's a strange thing. You daven like next to the mechitza. It's not balanced. The shliach tzibur is supposed to be among the tzibur, so you understand it's very important that the woman should also feel a part of it. But most shuls, bima's in the center. It's the way that it is. You're surrounded on both sides. So the kala is not on the edge. The same way, if you see an entourage at a wedding, a whole group of people walking, you know where the bride is. You know where the groom is. You don't have to look. You know that she's in the center, right? You can use this as a mashal nimshal for anything that's important. Any chashuv person, a rebbe, is walking down the street, right? And you want to know, where's the rebbe? It's obvious. The rebbe's in the middle. So if you think about it carefully, let's just unpack this a little bit. Why is that the case? Let's talk about it from a very utilitarian perspective, just on a basic, pragmatic, practical level, because we want as many people as possible to be close to the Rebbe, right? So if the Rebbe is all the way on one side, so then you just have one row of people, right? One person is very close, another person a little bit less close, and 3 or 4 people. If he's saying Divrei Torah, only that amount of people can hear it. Everybody else is too far. But once the Rebbe is in the center, or whoever else, giving a mashal, but lahavdil, some politician is walking or somebody else. So the news, right, they want to surround so that there's more space. But if you think about it, that practical reality reflects a deeper conceptual reality, which is that, well, why do people want to listen to this person? He is central, right? So it's not just he is physically centered, which is true, but it is emblematic. It's a metaphor, right? It is a physical concretization of the metaphor of the fact that this is a central figure. Central figures belong in the middle because they're central, right? So again, I'm using the word central as a metaphor, right? He's central, means he's very important, but he's centered, right? That's how it's supposed to be.
Is this without the tradition of, with Ashkenazim where the chassan circles the kala?
Oh wow, very beautiful.
Is it rooted from this idea?
Unbelievable. Usually the kala circles the chassan, right?
Yeah,
The kali circles the chassan, which is it's the activation of a pasuk that says in a keva to saiviv gaber. The feminine aspect will circle the male aspect. We learned about this in Likutei Moharan. Without getting too deeply into it, it's big secrets, big Kabbalistic secrets. But in some sense, yes. In some sense, if he wants a happy marriage, he should probably also run around her a couple of times. You know what I'm saying? So, he shouldn't get the wrong idea. They're both central. They're central to each other. But yes, the center point. There's something about that. So ukashem sha'kalihi hahileches b'merkaz v'chavreiseha, and her friends accompanying her haholchos miyamina umismaila, right? Yechashvu sheshvinin, and they're considered accompaniers, right? Those who accompany the bride. K'moiken Shabbos. How beautiful is that? So he says, of course, Shabbos has to be the center of the week, because Shabbos is the most important thing of the week. How could it be that in this physical world, the important people are in the middle and Shabbos is pushed all the way to the end? Shabbos is not pushed in the end. Shabbos is the center of reality. Shabbos is the central point of the week. To its right, it has three friends. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I'm sorry, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. To its left, it has three friends. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Yeah.
So, by that note, would you not put Shavuot sort of bang smack in the middle of the Omer?
Excellent question, and he's going to address that at the end. That's where he's going, because he wants to say these two things are not the same, and that's why shiur Seimer doesn't have the same idea. Okay, excellent. We're going to get there at the end. Okay, so v'chala yamim heim miyamino mismala, and all the rest of the days of the week are arranged around Shabbos. 3 days to the right, so to speak, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. 3 days to the left, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Shabbos is the center. Meaning to say, even though we live in this world, and in reality, yesh kan seder baruch shel tchila v'saif. It's true, there's a beginning of the week and an end to the week from this worldly standpoint, and it's the work week starts on Monday, and that's the reality, and the weekend goes until, that's the reality we live in. And from the standpoint of an external experience of this worldliness, right? You draw the line from one edge to the other edge. In this case, Shabbos is the last day of the week. But because the kala at the wedding, wherever stage of the wedding, whether it's the dancing, she's in the middle. Whether it's at the badekin, she's in the middle. Whether she's being walked down to the chuppah, she's in the middle. The kala is always in the middle. So from Shabbos, from the perspective of Shabbos, meaning from the perspective of the kala, all there is measuring to the right and measuring to the left, because she is in. And to the extent that you and I have a Shabbos consciousness, we're rooted in Shabbos, we identify with Shabbos, so then we don't see the whole week as a structure. We're in it, and we look to our right, and we look to our left, and we see how many days left, to the rest of the week, so to speak, starting from Shabbos. Kemoile in Shabbos HaMalka, and the same is true for Shabbos HaMalka. He merkaz HaShavua, Shabbos Malkasa is the center of the week. V'shar yamim nechshavim achana l'krasa ayam shacha mimena, and all the other days are either considered a preparation for Shabbos. So we said Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, or Asiya, Yitzira, and Beria, or Hamshacha mimena, or drawing Shabbos into the next 3 days, which is Neshama, Ruach, Nefesh, Beria, Yitzira, Asiya, right? Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Fascinating. So this is the difference. We'll end here for this part. This is the difference between an external perspective on time, where we're disassociated from the true nature of reality. So we think the week starts on Sunday and ends on Shabbos, and Shabbos is the last day of the week. And a pneumius perspective, where we ourselves are absorbed within the energy of Shabbos, from the center point, measuring 3 to the right, 3 to the left. And that's the side of what the Ari HaKadosh says, Yemina v'smala obenayu kala. And that's the way that the tzaddikim looked at the structure of the week. Incredible. Okay. Any questions before we move on? Yeah.
How does this fit in with creation? It's not just the world.
Creation is a story told from the perspective of this worldliness.
So this is MS and that?
This is an emes or emes. In some sense, it's a deeper emes. Because again, remember, here we're talking not so much from a physical standpoint of a week. We're speaking from the standpoint of importance or focus, right? What's the word? Significance. Centrality. All right, I like the word centrality because it both connotes center, like physical center, but it doesn't mean centrality, it just means a primary thing. So if you really consider it, what existed before Yom Rishon was the intention that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to create the world. That was already Shabbos, right? So Shabbos is the embodiment of centrality. That's all there was. It was just, and that's all that will be, is the Yom Shekulei Shabbos. That's where we're heading. So meaning, again, leave aside the structure of the week, which we count with our fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Leave that aside now and focus, instead of numbers, focus on degree of centrality or importance. Then you realize Shabbos is the center of existence. Only when we look past the mask of time and space and we see reality for what it really is, where we don't measure the center based on how many things we have and what's in the middle, but we measure it based on the significance of it, which is why we say in davening on Shabbos that Shabbos is tachlis maaseh shamayim va'aretz. Right? It's the pinnacle. It doesn't just mean that it's the end of the process, which it means that too. Right? Shabbos is the end. After HaKadosh Baruch Hu created 6 days of the week, He rested on Shabbos. True. Here we're speaking metaphysically, metaphorically, beyond time.
It would be more symmetrical to have 3 days of prayer, then Shabbos, and then 3 more days of prayer.
Yes, so what we're saying is, yes, it's true. What we're saying is that reality is true from a perspective outside of B'riyas Ha'olam. Meaning, when we look away from the physical experience of time and space, that is the reality. But because we live with physical eyes and physical ears and senses,
What kind of physical way had been made with 3 days, then Shabbos in 3 days?
the physical world is meant to mask Kadosh Baruch Hu's presence, right? We live in this reality. We're supposed to have Bechira, right? Why couldn't everything in creation be oriented in such a way where it would be obvious that Kadosh Baruch Hu is the king of the world? There's Hastara. So Rav Kluger is saying is that part and parcel of the Hastara with which Hashem created the world is the chitzoniistic perspective of there being 7 days. We have to battle against that. But Hashem wanted to create the world in that way, even though it doesn't exactly matim to the true nature of reality, like any other millions of things in this world that don't exactly reflect, the Malchusa Da'ara, the Malchusa D'Rekiah. Okay, that's Rav Jeremy.
So a point to consider that sort of fits in well with Shabbos being central. If we're thinking about planet Earth, first it's like let's say with the first hour of Shabbos when it comes in Australia at the international dateline. Shabbos, only 1/24th of the world is Shabbos, and it's 2/24th, and it keeps going to Shabbos everywhere, and then it gradually fades away in the same way.
Wow.
So actually you can see this.
You're seeing even Shabbos in and of itself goes in and then eases out.
Yeah.
Mysteries of creation. You had a question?
Yeah, I had a question. If Shabbos is in the middle of week, isn't like Hashem puts the holiest things last? If Shabbos is the holiest day of the week, why should He put it in the middle? Why not the last day of the week?
Like which holy things are last?
Like in Shemona Esrei, Hashem put Sim Shalom last because peace is very holy.
Unbelievable question. So what we're saying here is that there's a difference between the way that we are in this world, where really Shabbos is the last, right? And the way that we experience this world. You're right. We always say, for example, if a person's giving a speech and he wants to thank lots of people, maybe you ever heard this, they say they save the best for last. They save the most important person, right? So like when you ever have to thank your dad, you'll thank him all the way at the end because your dad's the most important, right? You say we save the most important goes to the end. It's called Achron Chaviv. That's in this world. That's true. That's true. And that's why even in Shemona Esrei is part of our like the way that we live in this world, the most important is last. Here we're speaking like almost as if we're closing our eyes from the week the way that we live in it, and we're going back up like in Shemayim. In Shemayim, always the most important thing is in the middle. Right? So the question is, the things that we experience in this world, and in that case, you're right, Shabbos is last, because everything that's important goes at the end. Here we're saying really, 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 really though, like underneath, if you took off layer after layer after layer and you looked really what's going on, really Shabbos is the middle, because really the middle is the most important. There's another answer to the question, but I'm going to leave it for there. Okay, that's an excellent question. Amazing. We're so privileged to have this boy here with us. What a neshama. Amazing. And we're grateful to his amazing father for bringing a friend. No, he is your friend. He is your friend. Of course he is. If we could be friends with Hashem, your kids could be friends with you. L'chaim, l'chaim. Okay, Gaval. Yeah, one more question.
Maybe it's going to be covered later on, like next week. So if so, just don't answer that. But like, what's the practical application of this in like our lives? It's like very like Shabbos the middle of the week, okay? That's not. No. It's in respect to
if we
thing, all right.
No. If we're saying Azma, then we should never have moved forward from that. Then we didn't get it yet, right? Because he's not just saying like a nice fact. Shabbos is. If I mamish believed that Shabbos was the center of the week, then Shabbos is the center of my life. Then my whole life needs to change immediately. Like it's that. What's the practical application? There's no practical. Meaning, it's all casual. What's the practical application that a ger realizes? That Christianity is not the truth and Yiddishkeit is the truth. I mean, practical application. His whole life needs to change. Everything. It's the most practical thing in the world because it changes the way that he looks at the world. When we're learning these ideas, that's the goal. Meaning Rav Kluger is trying to tell us, yes, there's a fundamental, essential shift in our relationship with Shabbos if we saw it as being the end, or we truly understand that it is Makar HaBracha, not in the sense that we pay lip service to that literally when we just, sing L'chadaydim and say Ki Makar HaBracha. No, these ideas are supposed to mamish change us, which means that I have to reorient myself vis-a-vis the way that I look not only at Shabbos but at the whole structure of time, legamri, and also aside from that more general, which I think is pretty practical, but it requires work. More general, there's a hyper practical application, which means that I have to be mechaben sometime during the day on Wednesday that I'm beginning to be mekabel the ha'ara from Shabbos that's coming. If I thought that Wednesday is smack in the middle of the week, then I don't know where it is in relation to Shabbos. I don't have the same. I have to recognize that when the Ramban learns the mitzvah d'oraisa of Zachar Seim HaShabbos Akadja, which we learned last week, means that a little bit every day I'm seeing in orientation to Shabbos. This idea takes it millions of steps further, because now I understand actually that there is nothing but Shabbos. Meaning, I am either drawing on the energy of Shabbos to come, or I'm riding on the energy of Shabbos that was. Like, that's the 6 days of the week. It's not weekday. Shabbos. It's mamish supposed to be that a person is conscious in their kavanah of the way that they relate to time. Wednesday is not Wednesday. Wednesday is Asiya Klape, the Atzilus of the Shabbos that is. You understand? Thursday is not Thursday. Thursday is I ascend another rung on the ladder towards Shabbos. Friday, and then I have a theory of the way that I can engage in the week in a way that's much more meaningful. So again, a lot of the things that we learn, you know my style. We don't do practical. I try as best I can to make practical eitzes, but it's okay a little bit. But the hope is that it can sort of. I posted to my status the other day. Did everybody see this message? It's a sweet, amazing boy from Hasmo sent in this incredible message. And I'm going to completely forget his name now. I'll find it. Because he mamish nailed it. He really chapped the tefasat ha'inyan. And he said like this. He says, honestly, you really have, because he's listening to the shiurim, in my eyes, you've honestly made Judaism more practical by making it less practical. That's what he said. He said, through zooming out on the whole world, you've helped me zoom into every bit of life. That's the goal. That's the goal. Otherwise, it's just an abstract theory. But what I hope to do is, not me, but I hope through these teachings, what we hope to create is that we should have such abstract existential lucidity that it absolutely informs every single detail of our lives. That's the hope. Because if you start the other way and it's just about this tool and that workshop and this, and you're working on Kas now, and you work on Shalom Bayis, but you don't have it in the context of like the picture on the puzzle box, you'll have all the pieces, but you don't necessarily know how to put them all together. That's the hope.
With this perspective is as opposed to the general perspective of 1 to 6 kind of Shabbos, it's like it's all like great for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, rather than that being the beginning of the process of the actual Shabbos, it's just kind of like walking away, so to speak.
It's the afterglow. You're still drawing it down. You're drawing it down. You're being mamshech that light. Shabbos, the klal is, and with this we'll really finish, we're going way over time now with this bit, but Shabbos is Atzilus, and you're either, basically, Shabbos is the mountain peak, and you're basically either walking up to it or celebrating the return. But it's not like sad. It's like if a person ever climbed to the top of Kilimanjaro, where's Yoni? Yoni, you're with us? Where's Yoni? Yeah? Yoni's still with us, baby. I love it. Hashem Shemamish blessing to get back to Eretz Yisrael, but it's so good because who would we look at? Raise your hand if you've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Okay, there you go. Right? So am I right that on the way down it's not like Atzuv, it's the best feeling in the world, right? You just climb to the top.
It's also like
It's Wednesday, Thursday. Yes, exactly.
Like if
Exactly.
somebody really appreciates the climb, then the descent has as much, almost as much value as the climb.
Video. And that's what it's supposed to be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Basking, Monday, Shabbos. And then Wednesday.
שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני